Record. We're good. All right, everybody. I'm Larry Higgins with Skip Genie, and I'm happy to bring you Greg Helbeck. This is going to be the first of quite a few case studies that we wanted to do just to share some of the different things some of our customers are doing, gives you different insight to multiple strategies and different techniques and just different things people are going through and how they deal with it and how they overcome things. And Greg is a prime example of that. That's why he's the first one I wanted to talk to. Really interesting story. He's come a long ways. And let's see, Greg, how long have I known you? 2 years, year and a half?
Years now, man. Time flies. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't remember some people I remember exactly when I met and when we first had a conversation. All I remember about you is you were consistently on the weekly phone calls we do. And I was like, okay, this guy's hustling. He's trying, I don't know how soon, but he's going to figure something out. But anyway, if you could just give us a quick intro or background, where you started and just kind of where you are today. And then we'll jump into the weeds there.
Yeah. So I'm Greg. Live in a couple different locations. I live in California now, but most of my business is in New York and Texas. So I'm kind of always traveling.
I forgot you're bi-coastal. So yeah.
Yeah. It's a fancy word. Yeah. Rent's too expensive in California, so I wouldn't recommend it. Anyway, so I started out, I started in the business about 4 years ago now. I was 20 at the time. I was in college, just kind of got into college and wanted to figure out this real estate thing. So for a while, I spun my wheels, and after like 9 months, I got some traction, and I started to do, some transactions here and there. Nothing crazy, nothing to get me out of my parents' house and move me to San Diego, but it was better than nothing. So after about 2 years, I'd say, into the business, I ran into a situation where two things. New York, where I'm originally from, was a market that's not very easy for newbies to break into. So I was running into a lot of trouble with attorneys and getting deals to the finish line, and I didn't have a lot of capital. And I was running into trouble in New York. And the second thing that I was running into was that I was spending a lot of money in marketing, and I wasn't converting any of these leads because of my lack of skills and experience. So I slowly started to run out of money. So I actually discovered Larry and Skip Genie about 2 years ago now. And he kind of gave me the whole idea on, going out and looking for vacant houses and just calling them instead of mailing them, because I was spending money on mail. It was sort of working. I'd get a deal here and there, and then I would run out of money again. And it was like this big vicious cycle. So long story short, I discovered that skip tracing. I made the commitment that I was going to make this work, at least in the short term, to get some cash flow back to then reinvest back into marketing. So I started, pretty much doing everything Larry said and targeting vacant properties. And I actually branched into a different market, the Dallas area in Texas, because I wanted to offset some of the BS that happens up in New York. I wanted to deal in a title company state, et cetera. So it took me a while. It took me about a couple months for sure. I did a deal virtually. I never saw the house. It was a skip trace property, a vacant house. And I made like 18,000. And then like the next week I did another deal. I made like 30,000. So like results not typical immediately, but it is definitely possible. And then after that, I started to really get the hang of this and, consistent multiple deals every month, big profits, 40, 50, sometimes $60,000 profits. And then ever since then, I've scaled up now to where I'm doing anywhere between 4 and 6 deals a month in New York and Texas. And I'm actually, I'm doing other marketing too, but I'm still using skip tracing as a primary lead gen for my business. And I will tell you right now, before we get into the rest of this, the most profitable properties that I do, and I'll tell you about that. I want to give a case study on a deal I'm in the middle of right now. The most profitable houses you will do are these skip trace vacant properties. Hands down, bar none. I don't think you can even argue there. So that's my background. And
brother Greg.
Yeah, man, they're just the best.
I'm not gonna argue with you on that.
They're the best.
And I'll stick to the major punchline here. So you graduated from college, last May? Last year, May of 2018.
Yeah.
So basically, you were still a college student, and that year, and we talked before we started doing this. I asked Greg if I could mention this. He said it's okay. But as a graduated college student in 2018, he made over $200,000, well over $200,000 wholesaling.
Yeah, well over.
And that's freaking phenomenal. I mean, I always say I have a lot of respect for people that are working. They either have full-time jobs and they're doing real estate on the side, trying to get established, get situated. Well, school's basically just like a job. You have other responsibility. You can't dedicate your entire daily activity to real estate like we do now. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that right there tells you he got the grasp of this. And you mentioned the most profitable deals. One of the reasons I went down this path myself into skip tracing and all this and cold calling was you don't have to spend much money.
No.
That's on mail. I know early in our conversation, basically when we first met, mail was your primary marketing channel. Is that right?
It was. Yeah.
And you were struggling with that. And I've seen that.
Very much so.
When you said that, I'm like, shocker. I'm like, that's what I expected. That's what so many people, newer investors, struggle with, because everybody says mail, mail, mail. Now, 2 years later, cold calling's picked up, like just mass cold calling, RVMs. That's become much more popular, and really it's starting to get saturated. But 2 years ago it wasn't. But this targeted stuff we do is a separate category. But they still preach mail, mail, mail. The problem with mail is it's not cheap, and it takes a lot of it. You can get deals, but you can spend thousands upon thousands of dollars to figure out, just to know what you're doing with mail, which list, the right messaging, the frequency, the sales process on the back end.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is there's a learning curve there, and it's expensive to get to the end of that. Cold calling, skip tracing and cold calling is much more forgiving, and you can do it on a much smaller budget. You put much less at risk. And that's why with newer investors, that's the advice I give them. Is like, look, like you're doing now, you've got back into doing some mail.
Yeah.
But you've got the resources to do it. You can play around. You can afford to spend some money and pay for that education, like what's working, what's not, that kind of thing. Starting out, it's like spend as little money as possible, get the most bang for your buck. And flat out, I do not know of a better way than to take that targeted approach, spend less money, skip tracing. It's more about the effort you put into it. And, when Greg got started, or, when you started, I remember, because we have a weekly phone call. It's kind of a coaching Q&A call. I'm just there to help all of our members, whatever. Greg was there every week, asking questions, updating us on leads. I was feeling bad for you for a while, because he was doing everything I said. He was finding the right properties, and then just various different reasons, stuff just wasn't closing. Yeah. I was like, man, this poor guy. So I was like, but I knew if you just stuck with it, I knew you were gonna hit your stride.
Yeah.
And I think part of what helped was, you got the hell out of New York initially for a little bit.
Yeah.
And I say that kind of jokingly. You had some unique challenges in New York. You talked about you didn't have a ton of funds. Well, in Texas, we do $10 earnest money contracts.
I love it.
Yeah. And I remember on a call, we talked about this on one of the weekly calls. You're like, wait a second, what? Because in New York, if I remember right, it's typically $1,000 to open to
minimum. Yeah.
We
go a little lower now. Yeah.
Yeah, you're a college student. You got to cover up $1,000 for anything you want to contract.
Yeah.
There's a very finite number of contracts you can have open at any given time, I suspect, when you're on a budget like that.
Yeah, it's just different. It's funny you say that now. And by the way, just to piggyback off what you said, I mean, direct mail is a way to get deals. And I think when you have it, it's not for newbies though, like you said, it's not for newbies. I mean, it could work for newbies, but it's going to be more expensive. It's going to be more time consuming. You really need to know what you're doing, and you have to unfortunately have experience for that a lot of times. So to get deals, if you're a newbie, I mean, I have a case study on someone that I met with, and we can get into that, like almost like a little ripple effect study. But anyway, New York, it was tough. It was really, I still do deals there all the time. I've done some great skip trace deals there, but with the deposits and the lawyers, and it's just the sales cycle is a lot longer in New York because of all the moving parts, which is what's causing me cash flow issues. So I took the leap of faith. I said, you know what? I mean, I'm going to do this remotely. I mean, screw it. I mean, as long as I find a good boots on the ground, someone I can work with, I can take care of the leads myself, and I'll make it work. So yeah, I mean, if you're listening to this and you're in New York, obviously it works. I do this multiple times a month. But in the beginning, I would say if you can do this in other markets, if you don't think you want to start in New York, because it is a little bit tougher to do this type of stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's all about the consistency, like Larry said. And in the beginning, I had some leads that were good opportunities. I was following the process, but there was a couple bad bounces. There were some attorneys. I dropped the ball because I was new to it. There was another one where I just didn't know what I didn't know, and I fumbled it. But once I got my first deal and I got some momentum, I understood the feedback loop. I started to all right, I know how to scale this now. And I started just cranking quick.
Yeah. And I know one of those deals that kind of fell through early on. I think it came back like 6, 7, 8, 9 months later for you or something.
It's like a boomerang. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you need a lot more early on, but it still came back later but you'd already kind of situated by then. But that's one of the unique things. So you could have just given up, thrown your hands up, said, look, screw this. It's, this sucks. It doesn't work in New York. Instead, you're like, hey, because I think we talked about this on some of our weekly calls, like, hey, virtual wholesaling, if you have somebody you can work with or a system to do it to vet your properties, it's the same thing. You find the types of leads you're looking for. You can do all this on a computer, and you skip tracing, cold call, and get these people on the phone. All that's on a computer. The only complication is you need somebody to look at these properties and help you move it.
That's correct.
Yeah, in your case, you partner with people with people you know and trust.
Yes,
and it's simple. I mean, once you get that lead, you're done. Your boots on the ground, the other market, help close it out and everything. I think.
Yeah.
And so you said, hey, I have this challenge, and here's how I'm going to work around it right now. I'm just going to get the hell out of New York and go to Texas.
Yeah.
It's good advice for everybody. Yeah.
Go right to Larry's backyard in Texas.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. Interesting story. So Greg literally, he just implemented. I talk about what to look for, the different type, what you want to say the perfect avatar is. Well, I talk about vacancy, death, and taxes. Greg's like, okay, Larry says that. That's what I'm going to go find. He got really good at it. And, we have a ton of skip, we're in the Houston area. We have a ton of Skip Genie members in Houston. I'm very open with everybody about what I look for and things like that. Never come across any of our Skip Genie members on the same property. Well, now I have on one. But at that time, I'd never come across, we never crossed paths. And then during one of the weekly calls, I've been looking at some stuff, vetting some deals in Austin and some leads in Austin. And Greg's like, hey, I'm working on this stuff. And, I got this interesting deal. It's in Austin. And he starts giving me the specifics of it. And these are well-researched properties. The owner had died, vacant houses, and delinquent taxes. And there were such unique specifics involved. I remembered a lot of it, even though I hadn't looked at it in a week or so. And then Greg's telling me all this, and I was like, hey, by the way, I figured out he's looking at the exact same lead that I am. And that's why I was like, I know he's paying attention now, because you didn't find that by accident.
No.
Yeah.
That did not just fall from heaven. No.
Yeah. And it was I know it was a complicated deal. We talked a lot about it. You ended up closing it. There was 20-something errors involved. Took a while.
That was crazy.
But it was a worthwhile deal, obviously.
Yeah. It was not that was, as they say, the juice was worth the squeeze.
Yeah, exactly. Some of these aren't real pretty. They're a little messy on the title side.
Took a year.
Yeah, but that's what we get paid to do. And some of the profit margins, and we'll get into some of your case studies now. When you hear some of these case studies from Greg, you're gonna, I'll clean up some messy title for numbers like that. I'll gladly do that. So I guess that's a good segue. If you want to share like your top 2 or 3 properties for either biggest deals or most interesting on your end, like I'd really like to hear these.
Yeah, I love talking about deals, as you can tell. Yeah. I mean, I could just talk about this for hours. So I'm going to do one of them in New York, and I'll do one of them in Texas. And let's start with the one in Texas because that's where you are right now. So the first one, so we've done a lot of business in Texas. So to just pull one out of the hat, I would talk about one. I'll do that one that you talked about, the one in Austin. Screw it. That's a good one. All right. So there's a house. Larry obviously saw the house too, but he was kind enough to let me take it on. And basically, it was a vacant house. Taxes were backed up. And the owner was deceased, but you wouldn't have known the owner was deceased if you just looked at a list because on paper it looked like they were alive. So and the tax delinquency was massive, and the mailing address, not the property address, the mailing address was in Maryland. So to me, and it had like a funny name. Like it wasn't like Rick Smith. It was like 2 initials and a last name. It didn't make sense. So I was like, this is interesting. And the tax delinquency was massive. So I looked into this thing, and it turned out like there was a really old person that lived there, and they passed away, and they had no kids, and all their siblings were deceased. So I hired a genealogist. It's a whole nother podcast basically, but I hired a genealogist, found that the nieces and nephews it was a complete, basically found the people who were entitled to sell the property. And after a year of putting together airship affidavits and title chains and all this BS, I think it was like a gross. I made a mistake during the deal, like with the taxes when I was negotiating with one of the guys, but it was a gross $80K wholesale fee. I screwed up the deal, so I had to pay some of the property taxes, so I didn't net that whole thing. But nonetheless, on the assignment, it was like $80,000, and it was a tough property to do. I mean, it took a year to close. Like we rehabbed the title, not the house, and there were some times where I thought this thing was going to go right into the gutter because there were some unforeseen issues, and there were some people that gave us pushback, but none of the attorneys. I thought the attorneys were only in New York, but I was wrong. Long story short, it was a good deal. But that was just from, the cost of marketing was, I never saw the house ever. Never even met any of these people personally. I never saw the house or met anyone in person. And it was not an easy deal, but it was clearly worth it. And I think just the experience alone of getting something like that to the finish line, being able to close deals with that, complication just is really good for anyone's confidence. So Larry, do you want to dissect that with me? Do you want me to just pivot to another one?
I'll say, Greg said I was kind enough to let him have that one. Well, I did back off of it because I said one thing. We have some people. I never want to put myself to be in a position that somebody can accuse me of stealing leads. As a skip trace company, people trust us. They submit lists to us and things like that. Our reputation now is pretty solid. People it rarely comes up anymore, but early on, a lot of people were suspicious. Like, how do I know you're not just going to take my leads and do something with them? I'm like, no, trust me. It's not I've got so much of my own stuff I can't get to.
Right.
So that was one thing. But the other thing was, in my initial research of that property, I knew this was going to come down to a ton of errors. Not errors like whoever would inherit the property.
Errors. Yeah.
And when you're dealing with that many errors, it can be phenomenal, or it could just kill it, because all it takes is one of them to not be on board. And I was just kind of like,
it's risk. Totally.
So I was kind of lazy. I'm like, man, I don't. Anyway, so I didn't want to be accused. I'm like, you got it. Good luck. Godspeed. And, so how did that? So you did your due diligence and you found this property. What did you end up contracting it for? Do you remember?
119,357. It was some wacky ass number, but it was like 119 grand.
And that number, that whack ass number wasn't by accident. For those of you, I didn't mention this in the beginning, but Greg is also a sales expert. And if you know John Martinez, Midwest Rev, phenomenal sales training, the best out there. Well, Greg has helped him teach people how to implement this stuff. He knows it inside and out. I'm not a sales guy, but Greg is. So that number is not by accident, that funky number. So, but anyway, I digress. So you contract it for 119 and change. And then you remember, would you sell it for, like 200, 190, 195, something like that?
I think it was either 195 or 2. so the gross was pretty fat, but then the tax issue, so it was a 80K wholesale on the surface. And I was selling at a relatively discount too, because I think if I had a little bit more leverage in that thing, I could probably get more.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know what? I'm not going to go this far to just go this far. I'm going to close this thing. But anyway, so I mean, it was a fat deal. But the thing was, on that one, the deal took so long to close. And I talking about this is a whole negotiation thing. I really even though the seller needed to sell. Austin's a pretty hot market and there's a gazillion buyers out there. So I ended up telling the seller that I think I said I was going to pay his taxes, or we had a miscommunication when we signed the contract a year prior. And I thought I wasn't paying the taxes. He thought I was paying the taxes. And this was right before we were going to close. So, and the taxes arreared way more than they did before I contracted. So I really secretly had no leverage because I'm not going to lose this deal over paying a tax bill. So I ended up paying a lot of the seller's taxes. So it shrunk the assignment fee. But
I remember talking to you about that. Your contract, you were solid. Your contract, you were solid. But the problem was the seller, the main point of contact, the seller you'd originally negotiated with, he just had a different understanding.
Yes.
And so that's a complication because you got a huge amount of money on the other end of this transaction. But if that was his understanding, and you risk him backing out of it altogether, even though your contract is solid.
Yeah,
it gets a little hairy there. So
yeah, I wasn't gonna let that one go into the.
So it's instead of making this much money, I'll just make this much.
Yeah. But instead of buying a yacht, I'll just buy a speedboat.
Yeah, I mean, would you spend $20 in skip tracing to find all the errors, and then it basically had nothing in the deal.
Nothing.
So
besides my time, but yeah,
maybe 20 is being generous. Now later on, you paid a genealogist to help fill in some blanks and things like that.
Yeah, it wasn't anything. It wasn't terrible. I mean, just the experience alone of that deal was just whether I made $1 or not, just being able to do a deal like that is just it is more valuable than the money I made on that thing, even though it was a good profit. But saying wow, I can do a deal like this, and I was competing with no one in Austin, Texas, which is the hottest market, one of the hottest markets in the country.
Yeah. For anybody that knows the Austin market, just to hear you had a hell of a deal like that, and there was a grand total of zero competition.
Zero.
That's pretty phenomenal. And that's not by accident. The nature of these types of deals is nobody else is talking to these people.
No.
Or they couldn't get the deal done. That could be another scenario.
Oh, we've had that happen several times where they had another investor try to buy it and they didn't know what they were doing, and me and my partner went in and just crushed. And then another thing, it's funny you say that, Larry. I know some investors, you and I are pretty well networked, and we both know the same people. There are some investors that are my friends, and more power to them, but they're man, I don't even want to do this type of stuff. It's just a big pain in the ass. I'd rather just spend the money and get the mailings. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But that's basically saying really, this is not low-hanging fruit. So if you put the effort in and you study this, you will see results most likely, because it's not a sexy topic, but it's just such a niche that can be so profitable.
Well, it's funny because that's kind of what I call my roots, is the targeted stuff. And I kind of got away from that for a little bit. I've done some more higher volume marketing and more automation, different world altogether.
Yeah.
I don't like the headaches involved with that. There's a lot there I don't like, and I'm really getting ready to go back to just being targeted, just like I always did starting out.
Same here.
Yeah. So no right or wrong way. It's just what's your preference.
Yeah.
But I will say, if you're new on a tight budget, there is a right and wrong way. It's getting deals with the most forgiving types of deals. By that I mean they're easier to negotiate. You can screw up. You cannot know sales that well. That's another reason why I kind of went towards vacant and highly distressed houses. I suck at sales and I don't like negotiating. This type of stuff, you don't have to be that great, because in some cases you're literally informing people they own a property that it's free money. They had no idea they owned it.
Yeah, it's crazy. I couldn't believe that at first. It's it doesn't make sense.
So to put a cap on your Austin deal, it started off as an $80,000 wholesale fee. Ultimately, would you end up with $50,000 deal
or something? Yeah, it was still a sick deal.
That's not even your best deal by far. but that's obviously a more interesting one. And I think, was that one of the first deals you did in Texas?
Well, it was the first deal I contracted, but by the time it closed, I had a ton of.
Yeah. By the time it closed, you had everything. Yeah, you had
By the time it closed, I was like, oh, I forgot about this thing.
yeah. So there's
So
one. How about what's the most profitable skip trace deal you've done?
I'm in the middle of it right now, so it's not officially closed, but it's in escrow to sell, and it was a rehab deal. So, oh, I love talking about this deal. So, same situation, and I want to set the stage on this deal with I want to talk about goal setting. So I made a goal this year. I said I'm gonna do a deal that will net me at least $100,000 of net profit after I'm done with it. So I made the decision I was going to do that goal. Then I said, all right, well now, if I'm going to do this, and what market is going to allow me to have the highest chance of doing this? And it was New York, where I'm from, because I know the area really well, and I know some of these areas, their houses are very expensive. And I said, okay, well, what's going to be the best way to get a property that is going to allow me to do this? Well, vacant houses. So I found some vacant houses, and I started cold calling and texting. I saw a property. It was in an area. My grandparents actually live in this town. Really good area, but not so luxury where like it's like over $1 million. So it's like, good area. The guy, I start calling, I get no answer. So then I text the number, and I saw that the property mailing address was in New Jersey. The property was obviously in New York. So I call the guy. He doesn't answer the telephone. This isn't weird or anything, but I actually had his girlfriend's number too, because on the skip trace report, the girlfriend's number was there too. I call her. She didn't answer. So then I text him, and I text his girlfriend. I didn't know. He's like, what the f*** are you doing?
And I'll just interrupt real quick. For those of y'all that don't know a lot about skip tracing these targeted and highly distressed leads, this is not uncommon. It takes a little while. It seems weird at first, but it's like you have to be persistent.
Yeah.
And some of these people are hard to reach.
Very hard.
And it's like, but again, one of the reasons, Greg didn't hesitate. Girlfriend. It's like anybody you can get a contact for, you just start calling, texting, whatever.
Yeah. Even if I got to slide in the DMs, I'll slide in the DMs, whatever it takes. Have I done that? I have done that. So anyway, that's that's Facebook Messenger. Anyway, so guy, gets my text. Oh, that was my parents' house. Just sitting there, blah, 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 vacant house. That wasn't in tax distress, wasn't in mortgage distress. So that actually opened up my eyes to a whole other niche. But anyway, he's like, yeah, I'd sell it. I'm like, okay. Meanwhile, I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, well, probably just an average Joe Blow, gets a text, whatever. So, I do a little bit more homework on the property. I know that it's in a really, really good area, and the guy seems pretty cool to work with. Like, he's not like, this guy isn't like some sketchy seller who's like super distressed. Like the house is more distressed than the situation.
Yeah.
So long story short, I was planning on going to New York for St. Patrick's Day. And I said, hey dude, let me just meet you at the house. Like whatever. He's like, okay, cool. And I'm like zero expectations. I'm like, hey, whether I buy it or not, the guy seems like a nice guy. I go to this guy's house on like a Sunday evening or Sunday morning, and we're just walking around. The house needs some work, but it's really not that bad. It's in a great area. And, I'm just like, hey, listen, what would you sell this thing for? ARV is 440. He says, I just want to repeat that. The ARV is 440 on the house. The guy goes, well, I was looking to get like 140 for it. And I'm just like, I almost like started spazzing out. I'm like, I just do drugs before I came here. And he's like, I'm like, oh, okay. Meanwhile, I'm like, holy crap. And I go back, I go, if you can get that number, would you even be able to sign today? And he's like, no, I can't sign today. I have a bunch of other stuff to do. So obviously I never gave him an offer because he couldn't give me a decision. Long story short, the guy realized that I was way too low. He ends up selling me the property for 185. Okay. So I buy this property, close on the deal, take it down with hard money, put like a little bit of work into it. So I do a little bit of a rehab. I'm all in the deal at 200 right now. I have a signed contract. I'm in escrow at 345. So that's like $145,000 gross spread after you back out commissions, hard money. It's probably gonna be about in between 105 and 120 on a net profit basis. No mailing cost. I sent the guy a text message on my personal cell phone. It's gonna be a home run, assuming it closes, knock on wood. But I mean, that's a deal that I literally saw a vacant house, made a telephone call, and I'm going to make a lot of money on it. So, I mean, it sounds a lot easier than it is, but it's actually possible. And man, that's a hell of a property. I'm going to be upset when I sell it, honestly.
Well, it's not that they're easy, but when you're looking for the right things, you're going to come across. It's like, my friend, some of y'all know Mitch Stephen, owner finance guru, saying like, you can't get hit by the money truck if you're not standing in the street. I
love that.
You're putting yourself in that position by looking for these types of properties and these deals and being persistent in trying to contact them. That's the other thing. Some people kind of can find these types of leads, but they suck on the back end of the follow through and execution and getting in contact with somebody.
Yeah, title issues and all that. Yeah, it's a whole.
Using poor data anyway. But that's even with the best data, it can be a challenge, and I know all about it. You got to jump through hoops sometimes.
I mean, it's worth it. You gotta, But that back to piggyback on your thing with that deal, Larry. I mean, that was a vacant house where there was no mailing address. There was a different mailing address. So on the surface, I forgot to mention this. You're going to like this one, Larry. I can't believe I'm even telling this to you. The guy goes, gee, I got so many postcards over the years. You're the only guy who's ever called me or texted me. And I just go, okay, thanks.
Yeah. I have heard that before. When I first started working with Will, the very first cold call we did, we're like, okay, let's start. It was like a big deal. We're going to start making calls today. We started this little partnership on a little thing we wanted to do. And the very first lady we talked to, because sometimes you come across people that aren't real happy you called them. I'm like, you can have the same people, you can mail them a letter and they'll take the time to call you back and rip your head off. It's like, But the very first call we made, this really nice old lady, she wasn't selling, but she's like, I really appreciate you taking the time to call. All these other people send letters, but I just appreciate you picking up the phone, taking the time. You never know how they're going to react, but I love hearing that because some people do. That's one of the things that'll set you apart, just calling in general. If you have the right messaging, you don't come across as the wrong way, whatever that might be. Some of that can vary depending on the person on the other end. So that's another home run. I mean, that is a grand slam deal by any measure. I mean, I know your marketing spend is very little. It's gone up a little bit since you've gotten into, you're doing some more mail now to augment what you're doing with the skip tracing and cold calling. But, what do you think each month, what do you think you're not counting mail, just on skip tracing and just going through that process and cold calling? What do you think your marketing spend is? $1,000?
I just hired an assistant, virtual assistant, but I'll call her an assistant. So that's not going to be too expensive. It's not even $1,000, Larry. It's not even $1,000. Excluding direct mail, no, not even close. It's like a few $100.
Yeah, and just because you do the calls yourself still, right?
Yes, but I'm going to have this. Well, the targeted calls, not the mass stuff.
Yeah. And at some point, that's always a battle when you're going after these really targeted leads. It's like
that's the tough part.
Hand them off to some Joe Blow cold caller that might blow it because it's a potentially $120,000 deal. So that's always a struggle initially to find that person you have that comfort level with. And but the bottom line is you're established. You could spend as much as you want to. You know how to use the data. You know what you're looking for. And how much did you say a month? A few $100?
Not even, maybe less than 500, a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not a lot. I mean, and that's the thing I tell people. I'm like, listen, and I still do some cold calling and I'm proud of it because I know for a fact, number one, I've been doing this for a while. Number two, I got a lot to learn. Number three, these are good freaking cold calls. I'm not just picking up a freaking absentee owner's list and just blowing through it and being like, hey, you want to sell your house? I know when I call this,
miserable to talk to all those people.
Horrible.
These types of calls generally don't go that bad because they have been hammered and they're high distress. And it's like I don't like I talked about I don't like sales. I hate cold calling. I did a ton of it, but I was more comfortable with it because I'm like these people are a little bit more responsive. So I had a lot of good conversations, and but yeah, so for $200-300 a month, whatever, you're going out and getting deals $120,000.
Fat deals.
And
Yeah.
so you take that ratio or you take that number. Let's say you spent $6,000-7,000 maybe in marketing for 2018, the year you made over 200,000 wholesaling.
I didn't spend that much in marketing, but anyway.
Yeah, I'm being generous, conservative, extra conservative. The average cost per deal with mail is $5,000 to $7,000 in the bigger markets. You talk to anybody, it's like they would.
Not San Diego. San Diego, it's way more than that.
Yeah, but you talk to experienced investors. I've never been a high volume guy, but that's always everybody I talk to. The average cost per deal with mail is generally between $5,000 and $7,000. These are people that know what they're doing.
Yes.
And you ran your whole business on basically less than that and netted over 200,000 as a college student, a graduating college student last year. So I just want to give people a feel for, oh, that's great, you're doing these deals, but here's the numbers. You're doing it for pennies.
Well, that's the thing. It's cheap, and it doesn't. And this is where there's this whole like I personally right now, I'm doing more volume now because I'm just marketing more, but I would rather net a lot more money personally. This is from a 24-year-old perspective, so this could always change, but I would rather net more money personally, not have all that overhead. And because no matter what, I'm going to work, right? Like, I think everyone gets into this whole fantasy of like, oh, once my business is automated, I'm going to sit on the beach all day and eat cannolis. That's probably not the case because you didn't do what you needed to do to get there to like sit on the beach and do nothing. So like, if I'm going to work anyway, I'd rather just work on the right things, like making these targeted calls, now hiring people to then, keep more of the money. And I might not do as many deals, but for me, like I like the process of deal making. Like, it's fun for me. Like, I don't like, there's days where I'm like, there's shit days, but like, I like this. I think it's fun. Like, I jump up and down in my office. I'm walking around my other office down the street, like on the phone. Like, I think it's fun. So like, for me, it's like, I kind of like being in the weeds a little bit. So
like the thrill of the hunt too. Just, it's fun. Yeah.
Not work. I mean, I've had jobs when I was younger that sucked. Like, I was a lifeguard and like I had to sit there and watch little kids all day and put their floaties on. I'm like, now I'm just making phone calls and solving problems and can make as much money as you want. So, I mean, for me, it's fun. I like to link pleasure to this business because if you want to get good at this business, you got to be freaking committed to it. So,
and we talk about there's no right way, wrong way. So you're doing this stuff on penny, basically. I mean, you're doing it for nothing. On the other end, we have guys. So in Skip Genie, we have different customer types. So you're the targeted guy and like love it. That's the model I really like. I want to get back to that. Then we have others that let's say you spent $5,000 in skip tracing for the whole year of 2018 to make over 200,000.
Yeah.
We have guys that regularly spend well over 5,000 a month because they're doing different things with that data. They're higher volume guys. They're doing ringless voicemails. They're doing, handing that stuff off to a call center.
Yeah.
But they're also, it's totally different models. But I laugh because ultimately y'all might be netting the same thing.
I know.
Who knows? I can't speak for all those guys, but we had somebody the other day. Basically, they just spent $5,000 on one order. I mean, totally different model. Still work. He likes what he's doing. Cool. More. Hey, I'm happy. If you're happy,
wrong way. Yeah.
But I really, where my heart is. So.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I still do mail and I skip trace too, but the mail is good because I just know now, like, we have a lot of momentum built up and blah, blah, blah. But I at the end of the day, man, I look at, like, I'm a big 80-20 guy. Like, I do 80-20 thinking and 80-20 analysis on a lot of things in my business and my life. The most profitable deals I've ever done, I said this up before in this call, are these vacant houses from skip tracing. And for me, they're the most enjoyable.
Yeah.
For some reason. And I'm not just saying that because you're my homie and we're on this call,
yeah.
But it's true, right? It's true. The vacant house game has changed my life. So like if you catch me at a cocktail party and I've had a couple drinks, I'm probably going to start talking about vacant houses.
Yeah.
And it's true.
I am. Greg and I've done part of Investor Fuel Mastermind Group. We've actually done joint presentations on these types of leads, covering the sales and the the research skip tracing side, but we can sit together and talk about this stuff.
Oh yeah, I
But,
mean, yeah, it's
so
big time.
yeah, and I know you probably don't have a whole lot more time. Do you have time to talk about one more deal?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever you think is your favorite, or
Sure. So let's see here. Here's one that was really hairy. This is just like a crazy story. So dealing, this is actually, I want to tie this into follow. So the principle on this story is going to be following up.
Yeah.
So there's smoking hot. Well, actually, it was a pretty fringe area in Dallas called Fair Park. And, it's turning right now, but there's definitely some terrible areas there. So I ran into a deal down there, and, it was a pretty good property, had a tax delinquency. The owner was deceased, vacant, the whole shebang. Actually, I thought it was vacant, right, according to Google. But when I found out the skinny on the deal, it wasn't vacant. There was a squatter in there, basically vacant.
yeah. Even
better.
Yeah, squatter is a whole nother category.
Yeah, that's a whole other bag of burritos, dude. Yeah. Squatting edition. Anyway, so I got in touch with the guy who was one of the heirs, and he was kind of a jerk, to be honest with you. I really didn't like the guy. Some of these people, when you're in this, they're just very hard people to deal with. This guy was a real ball buster, and he was flaky, and just was not very good to deal with. So I had to follow up with this guy for a few months, and eventually it's like he was like a whack-a-mole. We just kept hitting this guy like bam, bam. We just kept following up with him. Eventually he's like, all right, I'll sell it. So we get the contract out, some title issues. So we end up, before we were going to buy this thing, we were planning on wholesaling it because the squatter was a whole situation that we didn't want to get involved in. And the guy that we were going to wholesale it to got a little cold feet. So we're like, he was out. We weren't going to let this deal go down the gutter. So it turns out in Texas, the squatter could have potentially claimed adverse possession, and we could have been gridlocked for a while. So we said to the seller, listen, man, if we're going to do this, we didn't know about this adverse possession situation before we signed the contract. So we're going to need a reduction in price. We ended up getting a reduction in price. Long story short, we took the deal down with the squatter inside the property. So we were taking a risk because the guy, if he was savvy, could have filed adverse, and we would have been, like I said, he would have stopped us right in our tracks for a while. The guy ended up, we went to go serve the eviction, so basically, even if you're squatting, you still have to get evicted, even in Texas. So we served the guy doesn't get out of there, serve him again. He volunteers to walk away. So the guy leaves the house, right? And I happen to be in Texas. And we go into this thing, and I thought this guy was setting up a booby trap for us or something. We were walking around in there, and it's a complete just dump. But the number we had it at was just insane. So we put it on the market the next day and sold it in one day. We made $50-something thousand on just a deal. We just sold it in one day. It was it was like this, because every third house in that neighborhood was turning. And there was a little bit of a risk there, and the cost per deal was nothing. But the two lessons are, number one, follow up. That was not a, hey, I want to sell, sign the contract right now. This was 4 or 6 month follow up.
Right.
And then number two was especially when you're going to get into more advanced deals, when you get your footing, you got to understand the risk reward ratio. And I was willing to risk some money for a while just to take this thing down and flip it flip it basically. And it paid off in our end. On the other side, that could have went the other way. We could have been gridlocked in a lawsuit for an adverse possession for 6 months. So it really comes down to your ability to handle risk and following up with people. So that was a fun deal. That was McDougal and I really like talking about that.
I remember that one. And that, in a situation like that, it's always okay, what's worst case scenario? And if worst case scenario happens, am I okay with it?
Yeah.
And just make that judgment.
That was cool.
I'll take that. I'll roll those dice, no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. You talk about follow up. I'll be doing an interview with him, I think next month. Just had a conversation with another one of our Skip Genie guys, and he's like, hey, this was 2 or 3 weeks ago. He said, I just want to let you know about this crazy thing that happened this week. I had 3 deals convert. He's like, well, I went back. So he got them under contract. He goes, well, I went back and looked. He goes, I knew I'd followed up with them a ton. But on 2 of those deals that converted in that week, he had followed up 30 something times. And then the third one was 29 or almost 30. That's the consistency. That gets outside of, that's more an execution. It's not necessarily just skip tracing. But
Yeah.
follow up, now all three of those deals, he's going to make well over 100K. He should
Oh
make
yeah.
well over 100K between those three deals. Very similar types of properties that we're looking for. He's kind of taking that target approach as well. But it's like they say, the fortune's in the follow up.
It is. There's just big money in the
That's something
follow-up.
I've struggled with, is doing the follow up. But
It's tough. It's tough. I mean, I have so many follow-up stories. I mean, that's a whole other show, but hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in the follow-up. I mean, we did a deal a couple months ago, 80 grand on the follow-up. Two and a half year old male piece. That's not skip tracing, but still, follow-up is follow-up. Once you get the lead, no matter how you acquire it, most of the deals are going to be follow-up. Like I locked down a house 2 weeks ago, follow-up. Most recent one was not a follow-up. Actually, hell, one more thing. I want to do one more little rabbit hole here. There's a deal. It took me like 4 months to get in touch. So this is just recent one. I got contracts in the mail. This guy is down in the hell is this? The house is in Dallas, but the guy lives in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, Farron, the guy's name is. I couldn't get in touch with this guy. It was like impossible to get in touch with this guy. So I followed up with his sister. She wouldn't answer. Then I kept texting her. She finally answers. We go back and forth. She realizes that I'm not playing around. So she gives me this guy's number after 4 months. And I call the guy. He's like a plumber, super nice guy. I don't know how I couldn't find his number because he's not even sketchy. And we're buying his deal for 33 right now. And he's supposed to sign the contract today. But that's a follow-up. That's a follow-up lead that, like, not low-hanging fruit. You could not find his number for some reason. And you gotta be resourceful. What is it? It's not a lack of resources. It's a lack of resourcefulness. I've heard that thing.
Yeah,
I've heard them all.
think about it. You need to add professional stalker to your profile.
Yeah.
That's almost what it takes to get the answer. It's not that they've said no and you're hounding them. It's like you don't stop until you reach somebody that can give you yes, no, go to hell, whatever. It's like then you've done everything you can do. You've established that contact. Okay, it is what it is.
Yeah, and I mean it's that's the persistence game, and it's like self-therapy for me to say this because there's times where I don't want to follow up and I don't want to be persistent, especially when you get some deals under your belt. You're like, but you got to just realize like what got you here. Like you can't stop doing the things that got you to where you're at. You got to keep getting better.
Yeah. So, the minute you stop, you know how deal flow works.
Oh yeah.
If you stop making those calls and stop doing the follow-ups, you will see your numbers go down. It just over time, and everybody's numbers aren't going to be the same. So Greg started in New York. Now he's doing stuff virtually. He's still doing stuff in New York, but he's doing stuff virtually. In the way he's marketing New York may be a little bit different. You're not doing email in Texas, are you? Just New York? Yeah.
No.
So
No.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that. So not every market has its unique nuances to it. Big markets, small markets, different states, you have different hassles and all that. So you just saw Greg's like, hell no, not in Texas. Because they're to market in the DFW Metroplex with mail, you're going to spend a lot of money. That's going to be that $5,000 to $7,000 on average to get that deal.
That's crazy.
Versus you're not in New York City. You're I think you're doing a smaller area, and you've taken kind of a targeted approach to the mailing. You're not doing 20,000 mailing, volume mailings or anything like that. It's a smaller, more niche list. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm doing some blanket stuff, but also some niche lists. I'll share something on here that I'll tie skip trace to mailing in because Larry, I know you've probably heard of this. What I'm doing with my mailing lists, sometimes what you can do sometimes is that you can actually take a mailing list and you can skip trace the mailing list and get the most recent addresses that's different from the mailing addresses and then mail those people, and no one else is doing that until they heard this call. So you can use skip trace to mail. Does that make sense?
And it does. It does. And we have some people that we don't have a lot, but they actually use us just to get those out. They don't even want a cold call. They just want the addresses we provide in our data set
that are different from the mailing addresses.
Yeah, that's all they're looking for. They're like, I'm not calling anybody. I want these addresses. So, hey, cool. Because that's the problem, not to turn this into, Skip Genie is the best ever. When we are, but no. We have a complete data set. It's not just phone numbers. It's phone numbers. It's everything you need to truly skip trace. So you've taken that a little bit step further. And if y'all follow Greg, and we'll get into that at the end, he really researches a lot, and he will take when you're well researched and you take time to really dig into this stuff, you get into the nuances and the weeds and things like that. Instead of just doing the mail, you're like, hey, I'm going to get the most current mailing address and send it there. It's, it devils in the details, and that kind of stuff makes a difference. It absolutely makes a difference.
It does, especially in the competitive market that everyone's in. It's like, I was watching a Brian Tracy documentary last night before I went to bed, and he's like, if you want to be successful, you need to be in the top 10%. All successful people are in the top. And then he said, all successful people are really, really, really good at what they do. That's what separates them. And it's like, all this stuff that we're saying is like common sense, sort of. Follow up, be persistent, be really good at what you do. But it's like, it's just, that's just the truth. You know what I mean? Like,
you hear a lot of things, but until you've seen it for yourself, you've seen, like, supposedly it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at anything.
Yeah. Oh, I've heard that.
I've got my 10,000 hours in skip tracing and all that kind of stuff, and looking at lists and how to process stuff. I'm not going to say, hey, I'm the greatest at it, but I'm pretty proficient, and I can share a lot of information about that stuff. But, you have to be doing it. You don't realize how much you're learning throughout that process. At one level, you're learning, but you look back from where you were a year ago, even though a year ago you knew what you were doing, but just from 1 year ago to today, Lord knows how much more you've learned just through implementation, being exposed to different things, and this whole
quick. And it happens sort of like, it's not a get rich quick, even though I do believe real estate is a get rich quick, but that's a whole nother situation.
Yeah.
Get rich easy. But when you do this every day, your daily wins in the skip trace game compound. So like, I went from like not doing a skip trace deal to like doing multiple a month in a relatively short period of time. Like, if you take it like a 12-month cycle or an 18-month cycle, like, I've done a good amount, like a lot of business kind of quickly, but it didn't happen overnight. Once I got past like the Seth Godin calls the dip, it like kind of shoots up. It's like a hockey stick curve, because you start to figure out what works, and then you just keep doing that over and over and over again.
That's too many people give up during that little curve. They just give up. It may work for other people, it doesn't work for me, or whatever. Or I don't like this.
Yep.
I like it because you haven't seen yet. There hasn't been a payoff for you yet. It's on the way.
It's coming.
Figure this out. You were one of these guys that took a little while to hit your stride. We've had other people literally, like, we've had a couple people, they take return mail and skip trace it. And the very first piece that they skip trace, one guy did like a $40,000 deal. Like, right out the gate, boom, here's a home run deal, just like that.
Oh, man, that kind of makes you jaded, though,
Yeah, well, I tell them, like, the lady in Florida did the same thing. First piece of mail she skip traced and called them. It was like a $30,000 deal.
Oh, my God.
I always tell people I'm happy and sad for you, because this is your new expectation that you're just going to make a phone call and bam, here's $40,000 check.
Yeah. Oh, my God. That's like my buddy. He did that door knocking when he started. I'm like, oh. Like, it's good and bad. I'm glad that didn't happen to me in the beginning.
It damn sure didn't happen to me.
I spun my wheels, man. But anyway, this skip trace stuff is amazing. I'm not just saying that because I'm on Larry's show. I mean it. Like, you can tell by my stories and energy, especially it's still early in the morning here in California. I love this type of vacant house stuff. And if you catch me at a cocktail party with Larry, we'll be talking about vacant houses.
We may do a follow-up interview down the road. We haven't really gotten into the weeds too much. This is kind of a higher level overview. I just want to give people an example of, hey, if you're out there and you're wondering, is this for you? Is real estate in general, wholesaling, skip tracing, cold calling, does it work? Is it for me? At a high level, you can see what Greg, you were struggling with marketing. How did you find us, by the way? Do you remember?
So John, I'm good friends with John Martinez.
Oh, okay.
He told me about Will Dinker, and Will is your partner. And I was like, okay. So I called Skip Genie headquarters, and I think I reached this guy named Larry Higgins.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, is this Greg? I'm like, hi. And so I left him a voicemail, and we were cool.
Oh, okay. I do remember the phone call now. Okay. I didn't know if it was from a podcast or something else. Yeah. Okay.
Whoa. oh yeah, I'm kind of new. But I heard you on a bunch of podcasts, and like shows like this resonated with me when I wasn't the guy getting interviewed, because you were the guy getting interviewed by the podcast guest, and you were talking about these vacant houses, and I'm like, holy crap! I'm like, if this guy in Houston can do it, this can totally get done.
Yeah,
You tell me,
can do it.
yeah, no, because you were like, you were telling me what you were doing, and I'm like, wait a minute, he's just finding these vacant houses and calling them. I'm like, wait a minute, there's like, I can totally do this, you know?
Well, that's how I got into vacant houses, because I was struggling with mail when I started. I'm like, you know, they say skip trace your return mail. And then I always heard if you don't have money or you're having trouble getting deals, go out and drive for dollars. Go find vacant houses. That was like something everybody said. I'm like, well, if it's that easy, why don't I just get really good at this?
Yeah, right.
What put me down this path like 4 or 5 years ago. I literally came down to that. I'm like, well, if it's so freaking cheap and easy, why not just get really good at it? And then through that process, I learned all the nuance, like where's the higher probability of getting a deal, not just any vacant house, but which ones are the most distressed that you get a higher ratio of leads to deals and better deals.
Yeah, lead stacking and all that. Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
So it's been an interesting journey. So not to get into my story, but anyway, so that's why I wanted to talk to Greg. It's a very interesting overall case study. We did get into 2 or 3 of those deals. Just to give you a taste of one way you can apply this and execute it. Doesn't take a ton of money. You do have to put a little bit of effort into it. There's no way around that.
There's I don't want to have people have that easy button thing. This requires effort and specific knowledge. But you can.
That's funny. Yeah. You started with no knowledge of it at all, and you learned it. You took a lot on yourself researching. You were committed to those weekly calls. You were on the weekly calls, asking questions, giving updates, getting feedback.
Yeah.
But it's what I found is we get some people that go down this road and they want to be really targeted. Jonathan and Dallas, a mutual friend of ours. Once they get going, they really get in. It can be fun. I mean, it's effort. You're putting effort into it, but researching some of this stuff, you're really researching. It can get a little addicting sometimes. It's like you don't want to make the phone calls because you're too busy researching and finding.
I like researching. Yeah, way better than the.
Yeah, I can pull up I can sit there and do that for hours.
Oh, same here. That's fun. Yeah.
I know. We're running short on time, but
calls are a pain in the ass.
A random example, something I haven't seen. Greg's researching, trying to find the owner of a property, and he ends up finding, because sometimes you have to get outside of skip trace databases. We talk about that a lot.
Oh, I think I know where this.
Finding an unclaimed body affidavit or memorandum in Dallas County.
Crazy.
Yeah, I was like, I've never seen that. That's a first.
And someone actually got in touch with the heirs before me. I was flabbergasted. Yeah. Some guy in California. I call the guy. I go, how the hell did you find? He's like, oh, buddy, I know what I'm doing. I'm like, yeah.
Probably one of our guys.
No, he was some dude sitting in Santa Monica in his underwear making phone calls, but whatever.
Hey, more power to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess we'll go ahead and wrap this up. And I'll say Greg is active on social media. He's a voracious reader, gives a ton of book reviews, a lot of good stuff. So let's see, real estate entrepreneur podcast. He has a podcast going now. It's a great podcast.
Thanks.
He really hit the ground running with that. So real estate guru, podcast extraordinaire, and professional book reviewer. What else is there? Oh yeah.
I wouldn't say professional book reviewer yet because that hasn't turned into money. Oh, maybe actually it's turned into private money. So I guess.
Yeah. So if you want, you're on if you want to tell people how they can connect with you.
Yep. So we got Facebook, Greg Helbeck, Instagram, Grego_37. And then if you want to check out the podcast, Larry's actually a guest on one of my shows. Pave the Way podcast on all your Pave the Way podcast by Greg Helbeck. Search that on all podcasting platforms except for Google Play. Sorry. Google's a pain in the ass to deal with. And,
I'm an Apple guy, so I don't care.
Yeah, they're just a pain in the ass. I'm like, thank you, next. So yeah, that's how you can get in touch with me, and be happy to provide as much value as I can.
Yeah, and the guy just following, like interesting insight. Like I said, the book reviews alone are pretty good. Just 'cause I look at it, I'm like, yeah, I'm interested in that now, or some stuff I didn't know. Like I read a lot of history and biographies, so I don't stay on top of this newer stuff coming out. Like I won't call it self-help, but just improvement, like different aspects of, I don't know what you classify that, but
Self-help.
I know you have one, was it planned today for tomorrow?
Organized tomorrow today. That one was a hit for some reason. People are going,
that one, just the title alone, I'm like, I need to take a look at that.
I need to take a look at that.
That's something I struggle with. I'm a big wing it guy. My personality type, I don't like to commit things, so I count.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
The schedule that you posted this morning, I could never do that. I need wiggle room. So,
dude, it's funny. I'm like, I used to not be like this, and then, dude, my life was like chaos. I'm like, I could not get my important stuff done. So I said, I follow the schedule until like I'm going surfing later today. It's like at like 4:30, I'll just off the grid. But I'll follow the schedule from like 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. basically. Yeah. And I'm
surfer
good.
bro from New York, living in San
Look
Diego.
at the blonde hair and the blonde beard, you know. I got a new board actually. It's quite nice. So
there you go.
It's
So I'll take you fishing whenever you come down. We'll go fishing, and then when I go to San Diego, you can get see my.
That's it. Get you a longboard and you'll be cruising, dude. Just don't run into a killer whale.
Most lost. So
that's right.
All right, man. I know we ran long. I appreciate you taking the time to come on here and being the guinea pig for me getting this going. I will be doing more of these with other guys, just different types of case studies. Some of them will be just specific stuff, or I kind of like these overall as a person in business and everything you've done. So we'll have more of those coming at you in the future. And hey, Greg, I appreciate it. And I'll talk to you later.
See you, man. Bye.